Welcome to Popaholics, the podcast that reality knows, talking about Truman and his little show. If this is your first time coming to Popaholics, welcome. We're so happy to have you. This is a show about hot takes hotter than hot tasty pancakes. Delicious. I'm Christian Katie, your host of the show, and I'm joined by a couple other blokes.
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree. I'm sorry, everyone.
And boy, do we have a special guest lined up for you all the way from little old Outback. Is our friend Dave from the Truman Show podcast. What's it called? I can't remember.
The Rise of Jim Carey.
The Rise of Jim Carey, that's right.
Yeah.
Dave, welcome to the show. So good to have you.
Thank you so much. So good to be here. Yeah. No, I can't keep that up.
Oh, please.
Yes, that's... Oh, dear God.
For the record, your American accent
solid,
is way better than my
Christian's Australian accent. I loved it.
Do you know what's funny? Like, people do that accent for Australians, and I actually know people who sound exactly like that. like genuinely like, hey, bloody going, mates. You're like, oh, good, man. How are you? Yeah, spot on. It's good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually an impression of Niccol's Australian accent that he has done on Comedy Bang Bang before. It's a ludicrous version of an Australian. So thank you for indulging that silly voice. But you're from, we're so happy to have you. You're from the Rise of Jim Carey, a wonderful podcast. Tell us a little bit about it.
So good to be here. It's my co-host Tristan and I just, we love Jim Carrey. So we decided to go through his movies and use my expertise as an actor and an actor teacher, and his expertise as a filmmaker, and really like analyze a Jim Carrey film instead of just kind of looking at it and going, oh, it's funny, stuff happens, but like, no, like, what is he trying to say? How is he doing what he's doing? And why is he doing what he's doing? And we started off with the first episode going, I don't know how this is going to go. And then we got to the end of it like, wow, there is so much happening here. And every week we just get deeper and deeper into it. And the joy of it has come from when you get into later movies, you start going, oh, I saw when he started to do that, and I see now how he's applying that. So yeah, we love it.
Yeah, it's an excellent podcast. Give it a huge recommend. The content we'll be covering, you have an episode about it, so check it out after this, and you can find that on all your favorite podcast players. But this is the Popaholics, and why did we get a Jim Carrey expert? Well, Chris, what is our theme this month? It is March. We are marching into March. I quit. I'm done. I can't do this broadcast thing anymore. It's just too easy. Chris, we're marching into March. We got a new month. What's the theme? Why are we doing it?
Well, Christian, considering that Wanda Vision is wrapping up this month and we want to talk about that show as a whole, we decided to go ahead and make March our reality distortion month. So we're going to be talking about films that dive heavily into perspective. And we decided to start with The Truman Show.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into that in just a second. I just want to make a quick plug. I've been drinking White Claws this entire record because I'm trying to distort my reality from being a 30-year-old man into being an 18-year-old spring breaking banger.
Just to be clear, Christian has a full six-pack, and he showed us the lid.
I always have a six-pack ready to go at a moment's notice. In my dressing room is a six-pack and a reason to be there. That's
the bit that got me is the foam dome that you've got on, and the two beers you've got in there as well. It's strange, but hey, each to their own.
It goes all out.
This is my reality. Let's dive into it with 1998's The Truman Show.
Comments are still headed.
What else is on?
Yeah, let's see what else is.
Coming to you now from the largest studio ever constructed, it's The Truman Show!
Yeah! Good morning!
Good morning.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
What if?
No scripts, no cue cards.
Morning, Spencer. How's it going?
What if you were watched every moment of your life?
How many cameras you got there in that town?
5,000.
I believe Truman is the first child to have been legally adopted by a corporation.
That's correct.
Brilliant.
What if everyone you knew was pretending?
Hi, honey. Look what I got at the checkout. Dishwasher safe.
That's amazing.
Well, this movie's gonna mess you up for life and might give you a clinical disease. That is from the trailer of The Truman Show. Can I just say, right off the top, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I think it's going to be a giant love fest here. But let's introduce it the proper way we do on the show. 1998, directed by Peter Weir, written by Andrew Niccol, score by Burkhard Dallwitz. With a budget of $60 million, this was a critical success. Grossed $264 million. 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. And it stars Jim Carrey, Laura Linney, Ed Harris, Noah Emmerich, Natascha, McElhone, and Holland Taylor. What are we going to be talking about with The Truman Show? Well, we want to talk about our history with this film and whether we've seen it before. We're going to talk about our non-spoiler impressions, although this film is approaching 3 decades. By the end of this decade, it'll be. But it's a little over 2 decades old. We don't want to spoil it right off the bat, because if you just love the show and you're listening to us, we want to give it a non-spoiler impression. We'll go into spoilers, talk about the themes. We want to talk about if one of the characters is in fact evil. I want to dive into that, and how The Truman Show fits into our overall reality distortion month. So let's start it off first. We do a guest first portion on this. So Dave, if you'd be so kind, what is your history with The Truman Show? We know you've seen it before, but really, how many times have you seen it? When was the first time you saw it? Give us your history with it.
I have seen this movie probably 8 or 9 times. I saw it at the cinema, I'm pretty sure. I think my mum took me to go and see it. I remember the first time I saw this film, and it properly blew my mind. Like, I don't actually think my mum knew what she was taking me to see. I think she thought, oh, you like Jim Carrey? Jim Carrey's in this film.
It's a PG movie.
Right.
How crazy can it be?
And I walked out, and I was like, I just don't know how I feel anymore. She was like, oh God, I know.
What have I done?
Yeah, a bit of that. And it really, it was one of the first times, because as we talk about a lot on the podcast, like, Jim Carrey is such an idol for me, really, as a performer. And it was one of the first times that I'm like, oh, just because you're funny and you're wacky means that you can also do serious, heavy stuff, and you can actually use the skills of one to affect the other. And seeing that as a kid, like, left such an impression on me as a person and as a performer. And so I loved this film the moment I saw it.
Yeah. Brian.
So I saw this one for the first time at some point in high school. And like you said, it's the first time through immediately profoundly affected me, and I would recommend it to whoever I could for a certain period of time after that, just showing it to all my friends. And it's one of the first times, like you said, that I realized what Jim Carrey could do outside of the full-on slapstick comedy. And I think similar to, it's interesting you brought up Adam Sandler earlier, because this feels kind of similar to what Adam Sandler does with Paul Thomas Anderson in
Punch Drunk Love.
In Punch Drunk Love, where it's really using everything that Jim Carrey brings to performances and embodying it in this kind of 50s sitcom type of character, small town guy. And it makes it so much more emotionally impactful because of that. So I similarly grew up watching Jim Carrey, things like The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, the Ace Ventura movies. These were on repeat throughout my childhood. So coming to this one and into further in his career, I still haven't seen Man on the Moon, which is a real missed spot for me. But I was blown away conceptually by this, and Jim Carrey being there just makes it all the better.
Indeed. Chris.
Well, I didn't see this movie until much later on in life. I remember it being advertised in 1998, and I saw bits and pieces of it on television growing up, but it wasn't until I met my wife that I actually saw this movie in full. So about 7 years ago was the first time I saw this movie completely, because it's one of her favorite movies of all time, much like you, Christian. And I love Jim Carrey growing up. Like you, Brian, I used to watch Ace Ventura and The Mask and Dumb and Dumber. Huge fan of his, especially his dramatic roles outside of those comedic films, like we mentioned. But I've only seen this movie twice my entire life. Once with my wife when we first started dating, and then once for this episode. And I absolutely love this movie. And we'll get into why. But this is definitely one of his strongest performances out there, without a doubt.
Yeah, I want to say I could be lying. I could be lying to myself about this reality, but there's so many movies that we'd get like a preview. I think I've mentioned this before. You get like an HBO preview on your cable network over the weekend in the States. When I was younger, they would just be like, you get HBO free for a weekend. And I would just set up a VCR and record everything and rewatch it. I knew these weekends came up, and I was a lover of content, lover of movies, and I loved more mature movies even as a younger kid. And I would record everything. And I think this was one of those films that like premiered on Stars or something, or HBO on a free weekend, and I had it recorded. And I know I had it recorded in some way because I've watched this movie a ton. Even as a kid, I was just drawn to it. And I think a lot of it was Jim Carrey as an actor. My brothers raised me on Dumb and Dumber and Ace Ventura, and we talk to each other still to this day in quotes. I want to go someplace where I know somebody who can plug us into the social pipeline. I just like communicate feelings via Jim Carrey movies with my brothers. And so I think that was part of the attraction. But something about the Truman Show always spoke to me. And I think it's because Jim Carrey as an actor was able to be the gateway into this type of movie. But as we'll talk about, it is just an incredibly special movie. And I've always had a really special place in my heart for it. I really haven't seen it in the last few years. And even revisiting it, man, it just brings up so many great feelings and reinforces like, oh, I had good taste when I was a kid. Like, I'm glad this was a movie. Like, I'm very proud that I was obsessed with this movie because I still think it holds up to this day. So let's talk about those opinions that we have. What are our non-spoiler opinions? Dave, let's start with you again.
It's a masterpiece that creeps up on you. It really does. It actually asks. And especially when you look at the time in which it came out and what was happening in the world with TV and especially reality TV and things like that. And the question that it asks then is like so far ahead of the game that, you look at now and everyone's got a phone, everyone can be famous, YouTube channels, like everyone's documenting everything. Like we've turned
podcast.
Ugh. Right?
Gross.
Gross.
But like we really brought that onto ourselves in a way, because we are actively doing it to ourselves. But like I think the question that it asks, and the thing that I think about this movie probably once a month. Like something will happen and I will think about this movie and the themes of this movie, and I think that's the power of this movie, that you walk away from it and you will catch yourself doing something and you will ask yourself the question, like, what if somebody was watching me do this right now? Like, or like something will like fortuitously happen and you're like, is this set up? Like, what is happening right now? And I don't know many other movies that have that effect on you. And that have had that effect on me. So yeah, I would say my non-spoiler opinion is that it really makes you actually question reality.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying in that way. Watching it now, I similarly, Christian, hadn't seen it in at least 5 years, probably even longer than that. And coming back to it, it felt more prescient than ever. Like you said, Dave, to give some context, apparently Big Brother came out the year after this movie, which is just wild to think about. How aware of the times this movie was. We said it earlier, but Jim Carrey gives this ridiculously physical performance that is so over the top, but it's perfect for where he lives and how everything is facilitated for him to kind of be comfortable in that same thing every day, repeat this thing, just fall into the normality of it all. And that combined with the very strange fourth wall breaking and seeing how there are 5,000 cameras here, and back then it probably seemed even more far-fetched. Today, we all have these cameras. It's really not that far-fetched. We know how small cameras are. They could literally be anywhere all the time. And to your point, it's like that is kind of what makes this movie existentially very freaky. It's asking us, why do we do what we do? And what are the forces driving and attempting to motivate us in particular directions? And these are timeless ideas that are, at this point, 25 years technologically advanced, but it still feels completely in the moment and relevant with how things are sold. And I don't. This is kind of spoilery. The trailer kind of gives the premise of this movie, but I think the performances are all great. We talked about Jim Carrey. Ed Harris is really great in his role, as well as Laura Linney as the wife, doing these nearly like Lynchian straight ad reads, trying to be a housewife, suburban housewife selling these products. Noah Emmerich as well. I think Noah Emmerich really helps carry this movie and give us a reference point that really cuts to the heart of, to me, the most horrifying and existentially terrifying parts of this movie. So yeah, I think everything's working here. Directing, acting, it's a nearly perfect movie for me.
Chris?
Yeah, it's hard to say anything different from what both of you have said. I completely agree with everything that you've said. This movie is a depiction of society's voyeuristic tendencies at its like worst, you know? And like you said, Dave, it's so interesting the time at which this film came out, because we hadn't even hit the precipice of our obsession with reality television yet. So the film really is kind of prophetic in the way that it's depicting this reality. These people who've been watching this man grow up his entire life since birth. It's really quite astonishing. But I think that Jim Carrey was the perfect candidate to play Truman, because he's able to capture, like you said, these like manic highs, but like also really depict these more serious, thoughtful, existential moments in the film. And I want to talk about Truman's psychology a little bit more once we get into spoilers. But like you said, this movie is a masterpiece.
I think undoubtedly this movie is perfect. I had texted you guys because I was like maybe 30 minutes into it last night when I was rewatching it. And I don't, we did our favorite films and this was like a contender, but at the end of the day, I didn't put it on my favorite films, but I really regretted that choice while I was watching it. I'm like, I don't know if I know a movie that's executed, and I think it's a lot of skill. It's a lot of talent, but I think it's just something that happens with art where just everything just aligns and you can't control it, right? It's just, you have the right actors, you have the right script, you have the right director, the right time and place. And this movie really I feel like it defines our generation better than any other movie. And I think it has like Hitchcockian levels of suspense and intrigue and mystery to it. And I really don't, I'm a hypercritical person, and I look at this film and I don't know how it could be any better. I have no idea what you could even do to it to make it better. And that is just so rare for me. And I'd be really interested to hear the opinion of someone who's much younger than me. And clearly when it came out, people that are much older than me really, really loved it. It was critically acclaimed, and audiences loved it as well. So it seems to have this universal appeal. It's broad, but it doesn't shy away from really deep themes. It's the performances and execution is flawless. For a movie that is in a lot of ways about art and humanity, I don't know how you nail it as good as this movie. It really is. I really do think it's not even a perfect film. It's a perfect piece of art, and I know that is hyperbole. That is a lot, but it's a movie that leaves you wanting more. You leave it and you just can't help but think, what is the future for our characters? What is the future for this world? What is my future? What is my identity? What is reality? There's very few pieces of things that you consume that just like set you off on that spur, where you're obsessed with the art itself and you're obsessed with the questions that it asks. So I think it really is acting on all the purposes of media and art, and it makes us question even the essence of art. And I just it's going to be really hard as we go on. I'm often a really goofy person. I started this podcast by going off in a really ridiculous Australian accent with our first Australian guest, and I'm surprised he's still here. I'm a very goofy person, but it might be very hard as we go along for me not to get emotional about how I feel about this certain piece of content. So let's dive a little deeper into it and talk in spoilers. I get to play our last bumper here. I get to play our spoiler bumper. He even likes the spoiler alert. I like this guy.
So good. So good.
Thank you. So let's get into spoilers here. Let's talk broad themes and the moments that reinforce this for us. This film, I think this film might hold the record for amount of video essays that there are out there. There was no shortage in YouTubing and being like, let me get some opinions. There is stuff from literally 6 months ago that was produced that has hundreds of thousands of views on it on YouTube, all the way from like 8 years ago. Early days of YouTube video essays of this. This has been covered a lot. And what is insane, and I encourage all of you to do this, look at all these video essays, and there are obviously themes about reality and stuff, but man, people draw a lot of conclusions from this film. So I'm very excited to jump right into themes. Dave, give us your themes and impressions.
I think for me, like, this movie really draws the theme of consent. Which I think is really, really important. And I know one of the things that they really study at film school with this movie is consent. And like that idea of like, you've got Truman, who is owned by the studio, but has not consented to be there. And then you've got someone who has consented to manipulate a child their whole life. And basically, and then you've also got Laura Linney's character who has consented, but on the basis of fame, to be in a sexual relationship and have a child with this person on camera in front of the whole world. And like, it's interesting because Jim Carrey really was drawn to this film because of fame and the way in which the world reacts to famous people. And he felt like this is a clear example of what it feels like to be famous. That idea that everything you do and everywhere you go is filmed and put out there, and you have no control over it, and you have no consent over it as well. You can be walking down the street, like you look at TMZ, you walk down the street, they talk to you while you're going to get a bagel, and they ask you these horrible questions, and then they put it online, and you have no power over that. And I think the thing that this movie does really well is it really asks you that question of what are you willing to put out there? And what are you willing to do? And how does being in the spotlight actually affect us mentally? And what does that look like? And I think that's where the masterstroke of casting Jim Carrey as Truman really comes into play, because he is someone who can be as crazy as you need him to be, as fake as you need him to be, to play that character of Truman when he figures it out. But he's also someone who is willing to really show you the toll that this is having on his life. And if you look at him coming from the cable guy, who is somebody else who has been very highly affected by the media, to then somebody who's being affected and manipulated by the media in a very, very different way. It really blows my mind that then you look at these young, like I was listening to this is a tangent, but it's to do with the topic. I was listening to an interview with like Billie Eilish the other day, and she was saying, no one can ever really explain to you what fame is like. It is just this idea that like from one moment, you belong to everybody. And I think this idea that these people are so invested in this guy's life. They're watching him in the bar. They're watching him in the bath. They're, at work. They're just glued to this tube. And how much we're willing to give up of our own lives to invest in somebody else's life because that's what we're told to do. So that's my rant.
No. I love that.
Wow.
Also, Cable Guy, super underrated movie. And I immediately was like, oh, I'm going to, on my way to work tomorrow, I'm going to listen to the Jim Carrey, the Rise of Jim Carrey. I'm going to listen to your Cable Guy episode because I want to hear more of your thoughts on Cable Guy. Little plug for you right there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No, very good. See, and I watched 8 video essays, and the idea of consent in that quite verbiage, like it was not described that way. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that was excellent.
That's perfect, really.
Brian, what themes hit you this watch?
Yeah, so kind of on that same note, there's obviously like the free will element, and can you have free will if everything around you is manufactured? And obviously, Christof has a certain view of that and feels like Truman has free will, even though he's actively taking that away from him. We'll get into his potential motivations and what's behind his thoughts in a bit. But I think to your point about people spending so much time on him, even though some of them are betting, the audience is very much complicit in what he's going through. They know that it's all fake. They know that it's manufactured, but they still want him to escape it. And I think there's such an interesting thing. And looking back, not having watched a lot of reality television, I've never been personally drawn to it, but to see this escapism where you would rather watch someone be actively manipulated into acting particular ways that conform to what the mainstream narrative of life is supposed to be, than actually change your life yourself or go out and, escape the bubbles that we find ourselves in that maybe are less physical than the one that Truman is trapped in. But I love the idea of, as I said earlier, why do we do what we do? And what are the mechanisms of control that point us in those directions? We see so many examples of forced advertisement here, obviously through the main characters, the couple of guys that he works with who stop him every morning at a new billboard, just completely ridiculous. And even things as silly as very early in the movie, Truman is confronted with a on-set light that has fallen in front of him. And we hear on the radio later that, it was just a plane that had some things fall, and they just immediately sweep it under the rug. Mm-hmm. Yes, and, I don't mean to extrapolate too far, but it is really interesting today with the conversations around the news media and how things can be covered up publicly that I think are very relevant still, especially with internet news and the accessibility of so much information today. Aside from that,
Can I mention really quick, Brian, if it's okay?
Yeah.
The light that falls at the beginning is actually, when he picks it up, the name of the light is Sirius 9 Canis Major, which is the North Star, like the brightest star, right? And that's falling from the sky.
How perfect. That's great. So I think it is also talking about art itself on some level and the lengths that humans will go to entertain themselves. I feel like it's kind of pushing back against this idea of quote unquote reality, or like capturing life exactly as it is that people aspire to. And this weird balance of, so people like Stanley Kubrick, for example, someone that I'm a big fan of, but who in terms of treatment of actors has done some very questionable things, psychologically manipulating them to potentially dangerous degrees. At what cost does this sort of art come? I think is a very important question, especially, Dave, I didn't think about consent, that word, the whole time, but it's exactly that. If someone's not consenting to this, especially, it's this really basic form of something that just seems anti-human almost, just to actively take away someone's free will to craft your own version of reality over them, or to hold that over them. So yeah, I think ultimately the movie is saying that truth is bigger than that. You can't control Truman. His human spirit and his drive allows him to escape. And I think this is ultimately what draws the people watching them to Truman, because everything is against him. The world is actively trying to hold him back, and he still is able to escape and move past. So there's something hopeful there. But the darkest icing on the cake is the fact that they're happy for him, and then they change the channel. And it feels so true to where we are that it's heartbreaking.
Absolutely unfazed.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Well said. Chris.
Yeah, I love everything that both of you have mentioned. In terms of the themes that I pull away from the movie, I think the most obvious theme is obviously our perception of our own realities. You know, whatever we're fed is what we view our reality to be. And that's such an important message right now in the year 2020, because we all live in these tiny little social media bubbles where our realities are essentially curated, unknowingly or not, by the clicks that we make online. You know, we are fed news that we lean toward, unless we actively go out and search for opposing viewpoints. We are fed content that we are typically known to enjoy. You know, so we all kind of curate our own little personal bubbles, and each of our realities are distinct from one another. And that's kind of what Truman's living in here. He's living in his own little personal bubble curated by Christof, and his father, I'm going to say in quotation marks here, because he doesn't really have a father. But like essentially Christof is his father because he's built the world for Truman to exist in. But what's most interesting to me, I think, about this whole thing, and I said I wanted to talk about Truman's psychology a little bit earlier in the episode, is that there are also, I think, elements of like child rearing and nature versus nurture in this movie, because somehow, against all odds, Truman acts as if he's on a sitcom, and yet he doesn't know that he's on a sitcom. So like he even has a catchphrase. He has his own personal catchphrase, you know, and if I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. You know, he says that literally every single day he steps out his door, and the viewers watching him view that as a catchphrase. So like, what did it have to take for this one man from birth to act as if he's on a sitcom? Like all these different elements had to come into play through Christof to shape him into the person that he wanted to be. It's actually quite sinister, but I think there's really interesting conversations to be had here about, you know, his psychology and how this fake town has shaped him as a person. But Brian, I do agree with you that I think the final message in the film is actually quite hopeful in terms of like human spirit, because he does fight back against all odds and ends up escaping and hopefully going to live his life. But that's just so interesting to me.
Yeah, this movie could be, you know, on all those points, this movie could be so much darker. And apparently I was listening to the wonderful Rise of Jim Carey podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it. They're talking about how the story was supposed to be much more sci-fi and much more Philip K. Dick and dark. And I think that would have been a good movie, but again, that timing of expert crafting and just perfect essence of what it is very watchable from a kid's point of view. It's very deep, right? But it is very, very hopeful at the end of the day, I think, as far as what it lands on. And I think if it was a darker sci-fi, like a Dark City, I think of Dark City when I think of like the darker version of this film. I don't think it quite has the pizzazz. It would be missing a certain je ne sais quoi if it were. As far as themes go, I feel like I come like no matter, it's a great piece of art. Whenever you come to it at a different age, you get something different. There's the things that you guys have discussed, and I loved all the points you brought up. But I was thinking about right now. I think this film always it forces me to look inward. And right now, you know, we're working on this podcast, and we just rebranded. We have new themes. That's super fun. And I'm working on some music on this side, and I'm talking with marketing people about how to market it. And so much of the conversation around what you're putting online is around authenticity, is like what you're trying to sell. That's the catch brand, right? And when I watch the show, I'm thinking, well, okay, Truman is interesting because Truman is real, quote unquote, because he doesn't know it's fake. And he's living his realest life in front of the audience. And that's it, right? That's what we want, even in our art that we know is fictional. We love Daniel Day-Lewis because we could watch him tie his shoe and we're like, that guy needs to fucking tie his shoe. And that's why he's great, is because he embodies the dude that needs to tie his shoe. And that's why Truman's amazing. And that's the ultimate sell of art, is just being authentic. But I think this film poses at what cost does showing your true authenticity cost you to your personal freedom, your life, privacy? And I'd never, ever thought about that until I watched this film and I was thinking of the typical stuff and the reality stuff, but I immediately, as one does in 2021, doom scrolled, and I saw people posting photos of them doing things no human would do that unless there was a camera. And it's cool, and there's lots of attention and stuff, but it's like evoking imagery and things that aren't real to show that you're real, and there's an authentic you. And so much of what this film is about is at entertainment, but at what cost? And that really stuck out to me as a theme of balancing your privacy and your in art and what that means to who you are and how much do you put on the page and what works and that touched me very deeply and has made me question everything we're doing right now.
Christian, I want to say I definitely am on that same page. Like social media influencers, the line where it's like, and everything you see is for sale, just makes me think of these people who get involved in whatever it is, either a sort of marketing scheme or product placement, saying where every piece of apparel is bought. It seems so forward thinking, even though I'm sure there was stuff similar back in the day. But we've, as you said, Dave, we've really brought it upon ourselves and walked ourselves deeper into that.
And MySpace didn't come out until like 2000 and something. This is what's like even more mind blowing. Is
that was like what,
so
2007,
I think 2003 or 2004.
I don't know. We got Tom on the call.
I think it's also that thing with when you look at like influencers now, like the fact that people are willing to hire apartments to be their homes so that they can make their content in. And it really does bring up this idea of just like, like in the study of acting, like one of the things that you really look at is this ability to be realism and naturalism, right? Get in front of an audience and be real. But there's a thought and there's a school of thought there that knowing that there is an audience there, it doesn't matter who you are as an actor, you will always slightly be different in your performance knowing that there's an actor. Like knowing there's an audience, sorry. And I when you were talking, Christian, I was really thinking about that idea that the photos that we really, really love of rock stars are those candid photos when they're like sitting on a couch talking or something because they're real. They don't know that photo is being taken, so they're not doing anything. And I was like, and that's the line that Jim Carrey walks in this film. Like, how do you do that? But then you guys posed the question, I think it was Chris, like, they have manipulated him to a point that his natural reaction is to perform like he's in an ad. Like, that is his reality. Right. So him doing those things is actually him thinking that he is being normal and this is how people respond to each other, which is just bonkers, really. It's great.
Like, he becomes more outlandish the more he knows it's a joke, right? There's certain moments where you see his level of confidence in knowing like something is very amiss, like rise and elevate. And he follows that line of First he's like on the edge of losing it and he's just bonkers out there. And then there's the calm realization and like, okay, I know I'm performing. And then there's the try to kill me. I'm on the end of my rope. It's just a beautiful character arc that he has and throughout as far as his performance for who he knows. And he clearly by the end of the film goes like, you can kill me. He means shouting at what he may understand as God, right? But he sees that as the audience, right? As the people watching him. I think, lastly, what I'll say is on themes, and we'll move along, and I'll probably go into this more with the next question, is I was thinking about why did this movie speak to me so much? I grew up in a very, for those who don't know, in a very religious household, and I think my parents just wanted the best for me, but I was raised under a like Baptist Christian belief system, and I was in church multiple times a week, and it was a very big part of my life, and that was my family building a reality for me as far as how to view the world. And I think this movie, as I've grown up, was me forging my own path out of the reality that my parents wanted and into, whatever this next stage is, which is a lot of what, like, we look at Jim Carrey leaving that reality. And if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, you know that it's going to be trouble. Like, if you just logically think about the next steps for Jim Carrey, it's not easy. Everybody knows who he is. He's going to have he has psychological trauma for sure. And that's not going to be easy. And I don't want a sequel to The Truman Show. I think it lives better off in our imagination. And I think we can be Truman in regards to like how we view the next step of this journey. But, thinking about, is the next step even any more real? I think those are really important things to grapple with, of like, he's going to be entering another world, but it's run by systems that are technically fake. Like, he's going to have to deal with currency. Currency is not real. That is a false reality we have created. He's going to encounter more things that are just made up to keep things moving. And to me,
social constructions.
To me, that is what we have to face as people. Like, we know the Truman Show is a movie and it's fake. Truman realizes by the end of his experience that what he's in is fake. But then when he walks through that black void, he has to go into the real world and deal with more fake shit. Like, try to understand what is true. And that is a lifelong journey, and we all are on it, right? And so I think back to my life and the childhood that I grew up in, and breaking out of that, and still knowing that you deal with systems that are just human constructs. And at the end of the day, he grew up in a human construct that was very, probably violated many civil rights activist groups and laws, Geneva Conventions. But at the end of the day, it is something that we still have to live with as we go forward. So his creator, Christof, almost on the point too much. His name has the word Christ in it. He is a god. He is a father figure to Truman. I wanted to pose this question to the group, and we'll start with you, Dave. Dave, is Christof evil?
No. And the reason I will answer that so firmly is I believe he is misguided. I feel like he is the embodiment of that piece of an artist that is willing to just see how far they can take it in the pursuit of art. Unfortunately, his art is manipulating a child and an adult to creating this world for them. But I don't feel like he is doing it out of malice. And the reason I say that is because when the moment comes for him to kill Truman in that boat, he doesn't, because that's when I feel personally the humanity in him kicks back in, and he goes, but it's just that it's art, and it's my art, it's not his art, and I'm not willing for him to die for this. And I think that's almost the redeeming feature in him, that he then turns around. And it's the strangest part in the movie for me in a lot of ways, that he turns around to him and says, you can stay and we can keep going. We can keep doing this. And it's like, no, you can't, because now he knows, and it's never going to be real, because he's the whole rest of his life is him turning to people and going, so what's your real name then? Yeah. And that's what's really interesting. But I don't think that Christof is evil. I feel like he is a director who's been given, and there's many accounts of this, way too much power over people. If you talk about Hitchcock, you just have to look at how he treated that actress in The Shining and what he did to her. That is somebody with way too much power and who had really harsh psychological effects on somebody in the pursuit of art. But wasn't trying to do it. I don't believe he's trying to destroy Truman, which 100% Truman is leaving that house and is he's done for. He's donezo. He cannot come back from this. Have you, it just reminded me when you were talking before, and it goes on to have you guys ever heard of the story of, is it Onanoshi? The soldier who was on an island from World War II for 30 years thinking the war was still going?
Yeah, I've heard vaguely of it.
Yeah, it reminds me of that. And it reminds me of that idea that he goes back into society and he's like, what is this? I was better off in the jungle. And I really think that Christof is trying to create this perfect world for Truman, and he's trying to make his life something that he never had. So no, I don't think he is evil at all.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Dave. And just to build on your point a little bit, there is a moment in the film where he's speaking over the phone with Truman's love interest, and he says, if Truman wants to escape, there's no way for us to stop him. You know, and like you said, when Truman's on that boat and the lightning's striking the boat, he has the opportunity to drown Truman, but he delivers on that promise of, if Truman wants to leave, we cannot stop him from leaving, and he allows him to leave. So I agree with you. I don't. Even though I said that like some of his deeds are sinister, I think you put it much better. They are misguided, and I too do not believe that he's evil. Brian, what do you think?
So, yeah, I think that the word evil is definitely tricky because I definitely agree that he's misguided, and I don't think his intention is to break Truman. I agree with that, Dave. But if you're so willing to take away someone's free will and agency in the pursuit of not only art but massive profits, like this guy is apparently ridiculously loaded, according to like what we get tangentially. It's literally ownership of people and manipulation of them constantly through traumatic memories, like the whole idea of keeping him on the island with the death of his father, which was manufactured. I'm sure there were countless other traumas that prevented him from wanting to travel, or like you said, he had to become this sitcom person, and he became that way through all of these traumas, through learning what is accepted. He made him fear
dogs as a young child. We see a clip of him,
that
and
one
then
dog
his neighbor
primed to
has a
attack
Dalmatian,
him, yeah.
like a super aggressive dog, and that kind of keeps him at bay as well, right? He's reinforcing all these.
He also
phobias.
made him fear water, so he couldn't escape.
Right, and this was part of the, kind of psychological conditioning. So I feel like functionally, evil is something that is this abstract that has all this baggage around it. This seems like someone who's up there with like the worst type of people, motivated, even if they're misguided. These people should not have power in the world, you know? And I feel like there may be something where he is like a metaphor as well for the misguided God, demiurge type of thing, like Gnostic idea of God, this creator who believes he's benevolent and believes, you know, he is the ultimate God. Like you said, Dave, he's trying to convince him to stay there. It's like, we can make this better. Like, this is my creation. Why would you want to leave it? I'm rambling now, but I stray from calling people evil, especially fictional people, when he's not killing someone, but the way he views Truman almost as a non-human cuts to the core of the worst elements of that artistic spirit that can drive you to manipulate people, I think.
Brian, I knew how much you hated the word evil, so that's why I posed the question. And that's why I chose you last, because I knew you would dismiss the word evil immediately. You delivered.
Just on that, though, I would be very interested to know, which you can never know because it's a movie, but like the sliding scale that he went on. Because he's been there as long as Truman's been there. And I'd be very interested to know, when Truman was a baby, how much he went through, and then he's getting, and it's that very much what you hear about Hollywood and the film industry. They get a lot of praise, they get a lot of power, and then that scale slides and slides, and what becomes okay to you slides and slides and slides and slides until you to the point
right
that, you know, like, but like I'd be very interested to know, like, as baby Truman, what he had to wrestle with, and then once he started getting that feedback and people going, you know, he's also being conditioned by the producers in order to be able to deliver on what he has to do. And that's what the money's there for. You know, and that's one of the unfortunate things in life, where a lot of times, like, you give somebody enough money and they'll pretty much do anything. So, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, apparently the director had him do a biography, like a 10-page biography. And in the character of Christof, what Ed Harris had written for himself was that he had just had his like biggest success was a documentary on homeless people, which I find very interesting because he was looking at these people that didn't have a home and then transitions into creating the perfect home for one child and making a piece of art out of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dave, for better or worse, I think last year A Truman Show was actually a Truman Show was greenlit by Paramount, I believe.
What?
So, and I say for better or worse because who knows how good that could potentially be. I think it would be terrible, but they might be able to explore elements that you're talking about in a long form narrative as opposed to
Chris,
short.
we just watched The Truman Show. It's a bad idea.
Sorry.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
It's a terrible idea.
Sorry, Chris. They're doing a show like the movie, or they're actually adopting a child and putting them in.
Let me clarify. They are making a show out of the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, that
I thought
It was unclear. Yeah.
the latter would be horrific, and
Yeah.
I would definitely want to exit humanity at that point.
Yeah.
So I think Christof is like this like antithesis of when you talk about art and commerce, it's the pinnacle of art and commerce. It's capitalism and art in its most like perfect state. And I say perfect very intentionally, which is you're literally exploiting a life to sell cereal. It's like border and clearly Christof is a great artist. Like he built and runs a fictional world that a human lives in to sell cereal. Like that is the pinnacle. And not only is Christof creating this false world for people, but artists, especially people who make children's content or make content for young teens, make content for adults, they are selling a version of reality. And I think that onus is on artists to understand that when you put art forward, whether it's reality, we can go into the reality TV is more like the Truman Show, right? But at the end of the day, art is selling fakeness. But what you want people to leave with, like I said before, is authenticity. And you are responsible as an artist when you put out art and you are trying to manufacture authenticity, you are yourself creating a false art. And I think there's a lot of implications there. And I honestly see a lot of not only artistic creator, but also, fatherhood or motherhood in Christof's character. There's a lot that you do as a parent in shaping someone's reality. There's a lot that you do as an artist in shaping one's reality. And you can be doing it for all the quote unquote right reasons. But if you're doing it and at the end of the day to pay the bills, you're selling cereal, no offense, General Mills, maybe there's some introspection that's needed. And I feel like Christof is this ultimate form of like what we would call in the punk scene, a sellout. So again, I don't think he's evil. I think Christof is the biggest artistic sellout in the entire world in what artists always fear they may become.
Or is he the true artist because he is making his art showing the machine? You know what I mean?
No, because he tries to kill Truman as he's leaving.
But is he trying to show them what level producers are? Because you've got the producer who comes in and is like, you need to take care of this. We need to keep the show going. What level that, they're willing to go to create television.
Yeah.
Look, that's just a thought. Like, I think you're absolutely correct.
That's the nature versus nurture thing about him. That's saying like, he's Christof himself is the product of the environment that he's in, right? And has been, you were saying that before, that he's been shaped by he wanted to capture real life in art. Like he was seeking the ultimate goal in creation of art and humanity. And because of the way the money worked, this is what he's turned into. And this is what he's been pushed to. I like that. I think that's very fitting. Let's end with how does this... Dave, did you get a chance to catch up on WandaVision? We're wrapping this all around the MCU show, WandaVision. Did you get a chance to check out any episodes?
I only watched the long trailer for it, and then I watched a What I Must Know thing by Luther. So I get the concept of it, and I get how you guys have tied it back to this show. And I think it was very clever, actually. I was like, oh, that's a really long bow, but it's a perfect, and you could even tie it to the idea of the Matrix as well. Like,
sure,
that whole thing
definitely.
about, distortion of reality for a specific result.
It reminded me that this movie is on a whole nother level than WandaVision as far as all things are saying. But that WandaVision would not exist without this in the way that it's framed. And it definitely is a stepping stone, if not a higher stone, than WandaVision into kind of the way they're contextualizing Wanda living in that reality. Are there any other parallels that you gentlemen draw?
I think the cleanest line between the Truman Show and WandaVision, and the character that I think most represents Truman in WandaVision, is Vision himself. Because he is seemingly going along with this construct that Wanda has created. And then as reality starts to break and he starts to become more aware of what's going on, his urge to escape becomes greater. I think that's a direct parallel to the journey that Truman's on in the Truman Show.
Great point.
And Wanda is very much like Christof in this situation. Maybe not as aware of what's taking place, but she is an architect. She is shaping this reality to achieve something specific. So,
right, yeah.
And we'll go more in depth on that in our WandaVision episode.
It really makes me think about that old adage of like art imitating life or life imitating art. And I think when you look at WandaVision and you look at the Truman Show, they both use very cliched aesthetics of 50s ads, and then you look at like every sort of sitcom you can in WandaVision and put that forward. And in the last episode, we were talking about New Girl and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And a lot of the time, sitcoms, they throw back at you cliches about normal life to make it more relatable. But then we also talk about, like you said at the top, Christian, like one of the ways you communicate with your brothers is through quoting movies.
Right.
And I think the thing that they're really asking is how much of that is real and how much of what we actually do in real life is actually real. Because if you're learning a behavior from a sitcom, which is scripted and produced to create a particular response, then isn't what you're doing also fake because you're using that weapon to then get that response out of somebody because they relate to that content that they've watched. And that's where I look
cyclical.
At one. Yeah, and it's amazing. The more TV you consume, the more you bring it into your life. The more that you bring it into your life, the more that they put your life on screen. And that's why I think WandaVision looks brilliant, because they're really exploring that idea, as they do in the Truman Show, of what is the perfect family structure, what is the perfect environment to live in. And I think the problem that both of them have, and especially in the Truman Show, is real life is super, super messy, and heaps of it doesn't make sense. And the minute you try to wrap it in a bow in 25 minutes with ads, you cut out all the good stuff, and that is the messiness. So
right.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Dave. But have you tried Mount Cocoa? It's made from all natural cocoa beans.
Please go on. I'm having a nice bowl of Mount Cocoa right now.
Who the hell are you talking to? So I think it ties really great into that. I definitely see the linear path right into WandaVision. Let's wrap up with final thoughts on Truman Show. Open floor. Who's got final thoughts?
Yeah, so I just want to say, I feel like to your point, Dave, about Christof seeing the backstory. I don't know if you've seen Synecdoche, New York, but I feel like that would be an interesting double feature with this movie, to see how Christof formed through his traumas and trying to build up that world around him. But yeah, if you've gotten this far and haven't seen The Truman Show, it's a must watch. It's as relevant as it's ever been, and although it's kind of, the more you were talking about it there, Dave, it's like, I'm glad this is a movie that I'm recommending to people and someone's not sitting me down like, look, I'm going to show you this and it's going to perfectly encapsulate our relationship. But yeah, it's vast with huge implications that every time I watch it, it gets my mind going. So I'm always going to appreciate it for that.
I think for me, the thing about this movie was something that was noted at the very top by Christian, like a psychological syndrome actually developed because of this movie, which is Truman Syndrome, where multiple people have thought that they are in the Truman Show, which I think really speaks to Jim Carrey's performance and Peter Weir. It's Peter Weir, right? The director?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Their power to create a world and to create a character that you are so willing to step into and put yourself in there and can relate to. But I feel like one of the things that you should definitely do with this movie is every now and then just be like, hey, it's a movie. Because you can just
remind yourself.
You can fall. Well, did you guys read what he wanted to do? So Peter Weir wanted to have this thing during the original screenings where they stopped the movie and turned on a camera on the audience to remind, so that they felt like they were in the movie as well. And I'm just like,
that would have been insane.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I would have loved it and hated it all the same. But yeah.
Cases of Trumania spiked.
Yeah. But I can't recommend this movie highly enough.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both of you. This is a must watch. If you haven't seen it, please go out and watch it. Also, like Dave said, remember that it's a movie. My wife, after seeing this for the first time, did believe that there were cameras watching her for like a week. So it's a real thing. It's absolutely real. It's a real condition.
We had mentioned the cameras. You're like, there could be cameras anywhere. And I took a second to like look around and be like, are there extra cameras I don't know about? But I'm like looking at a webcam right now. I'm like, oh, there's one fucking camera. So I know where it's at. It's right there in front of my face.
And you don't know who's watching though. That's the thing. Like we're talking over Skype and we think it's a closed loop, but for all we know, somebody else is watching this as well.
Now, my FBI agent and I are on really good terms, so don't even worry about it.
He's off this week, yeah.
In my wrapping up, I just want to mention how beautiful this movie is and simple in its beauty. There's a moment where Truman and his buddy are drinking, his lifelong friend, and there's a quick advertisement for the movie hasn't told you yet about the advertisement thing. One of the brilliant things is the facade and how everything works doesn't happen until there's like a brief overview that lets you know about what the show is. But then the show is unbroken for an hour. And then it's not until then you get the interview with Christof and then you realize it. So this is very early on and they don't even tell you what's happening. But his buddy sips his beer and looks over and goes, wow, that's a beer. And he's holding it with the label facing. And then you get a cutaway shot and they're on the end of a road that just ends. It's a bridge that goes nowhere. Mm-hmm. And it's like moments like that where I'm like, oh my, like this movie is working before it even tells you that he can't escape, before it even tells you about the advertisements that are happening throughout, that it just shows you it. All right. And it leads you in. And it's that's why this movie is so freaking brilliant. It's just like, it's little moments like that throughout the entire thing that are just great attention to detail that are absolutely wonderful. And I also want to say, Christof knew this was going to happen. He knew this was going to happen. He knew that he would escape at some point. Because why else would you install God speakers? The man installed God speakers into the dome. And so for that,
and a door. And a door on the other side of the ocean. Like, he knew that he was going to escape and buy water. Like, he knew.
It even says exit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just completely ridiculous. I do want to say, I didn't talk about this moment, but I thought it was really touching, even though at this point, Truman has kidnapped his wife. But when he makes it across the bridge, there's a moment where both of them are genuinely, like, you could tell she kind of is really proud of him for having overcome that fear, even though her relationship is kind of fake on some level. That really, I was like, oh, wow, she actually does care about Truman. And it's, Dave, you disagree?
No, I was just thinking, like, Laura Linney's performance is just amazing. That flick really between actor and character, like just in the eyes, just these quick flicks of like, what's happening, what's he going to do, what's he going to say, is just like, oh, it's a masterstroke. Masterstroke.
It is.
She has my favorite line which is like when Truman pulls the knife on her and she like goes to hug. She's just like, how can anybody expect to work under these conditions?
It's unprofessional.
Dude, every time that like I'll be like working or something and it's, you know, something is like, like, oh, this is a stupid thing I have to deal with. I immediately want to go full Laura Linney, just break down.
Or when the mate just turns to the camera and is like, he's gone. And it's just like that moment where you're just like, I can't fix this. I'm not paid enough. I don't know what to do, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm like, we've all been there at work where you just turn to your manager, you're like, I don't know. Like, what do we do?
Oh my God. Yeah, his performance, dude, heartbreaking when he's telling him, like, if we were all in it, I'd have to be on it. And he's like grown up with Truman legitimately, but he's being fed it from Christof. I'm just like, oh my God, this is, again, it's a perfect movie. It's
I want to know where Marlon went the month that he was out of school with pneumonia. Was he like filming another show? Was he filming a movie? Like I would expect as an actor, that's probably what was happening. They had to construct some type of reason for him not to be in the town at that time.
I think I was reading a bit on the Wikipedia, and he was saying that there was like backstory to his character struggling with addiction and stuff, having a lot of regrets from his role in the whole thing. That,
well, he's always got
I
that
don't know if any was
six-pack
filmed,
ready. That's how he fixes everything. He shows up with that six-pack on the go, man. He just always has it. Like the moment when he's
got the
speeding
cooler in the car
with the truck, and he just like has it, and he's like running in with it, and how like he's trying to be like cool.
Yeah.
And
Marlon's actually really sorry to prolong this, but Marlon's actually a really interesting counterpoint to Truman because he has also grown up in this environment. Mm-hmm. The only difference is that he was aware of what was going on. So yeah, it makes sense that he struggles with addiction.
Yeah, Marlon definitely stuck out to me this watch through. Him and Christof. So that's gonna do it on Truman Show. Dave, I can't thank you enough for taking so much of your time to be with us. This was such a pleasure. It's I mean this in all sincerity. It is crazy for someone who's a fan of Jim Carrey, someone who's a fan of this movie, to connect with someone from the other side of the world and be like, oh, we both enjoyed this thing in parallel, even though we have lived thousands of miles away and grown up in completely different environments. It's really cool to be able to do this. Thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much.
It's been a genuine pleasure just chatting with you guys. And yeah, I thought the same thing when you guys like reached out to like, do you guys want to do this? I was just like, yes, 100%. I wanted, yes, let's do it. It'd be great. And yeah, it's just the power of movies, right? And pop culture. Like it brings people together. It creates a language that we all speak. So yeah.
Yeah. Where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You can definitely find us on Apple Podcasts and wherever you get your podcasts with The Rise of Jim Carey. You can. I'm in a comedy duo, Two Skivvies, and you can also find us at dandle.fun on Facebook, and that keeps us up to date with everything that's going on with us. So yeah.
Yeah, and don't listen to that bullshit podcast, The Jim Carrey Project. Oh my God, what a bunch of posers over there.
What is that?
Backstory. When you were getting on, I had gotten like, oh, he has a Jim Carrey podcast. And then I accidentally listened to them. I'm like, this guy's not from fucking Australia and their audio sounds terrible. Not to put on blast this other podcast, but first of all, you're not Australian. And second of all, work on your audio. I don't think they're very big, but they did pop up first. You got to do something about that, man. Maybe we'll give you the Popaholics bump. We'll give you the Popaholics bump.
Oh, yes.
We need it, guys.
Jim Carrey's gonna retweet our episode next week, so it's gonna be great.
Oh my God.
No,
that would be amazing.
Oh my God. I would love more than anything to
But
talk
thank
to
you so much, Dave, for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And on it, like earnestly, I listened to your Truman Show podcast. I listened to 2 of your episodes. I listened to Truman Show and I listened to the number 23 because I was like, that's Jim Carrey's worst movie, and I've not seen it in like a decade. And I was like, I need to hear someone shit on this movie. And you and Tristan were very kind in like how you're like, this just isn't our movie. You're very sweet, but you're very informative. You guys clearly do your research. You bring different perspectives. So I highly recommend people check out the show. I'm a now fan. I'm going to check out. I'm already down for Cable Guy, Dumb and Dumber. I'm so excited to listen to the.
I cannot wait to listen to your Grinch episode after what you said.
Gentlemen, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
Loyal listeners, you can find me on Twitter at Chris Conkling.
And you can find me at True Popaholic.
And you can find me at Christian Katie. You can find my music at Midnight Satire. If you enjoy the bumpers on the show, check out the music there on all your streaming services. And you can follow the podcast at Popaholics. All the social media platforms are linked below. We also got our YouTube channel. We've got older episodes going up there, our new main theme episodes. Maybe you're listening on YouTube. If so, hit us up in the comments. Emails to popaholicscast@gmail.com. We read all our emails and we talk about it on our weekly upload. Rate us 5 stars if you've enjoyed this thing. And go ahead and I'm going to say it right now. I don't do this for every guest. Go to the Rise of Jim Carey podcast, subscribe. It's good shit. And give them a 5-star review as well. You can even give them one first, okay? But just make sure you come on back. Give us one. If you write out a review on our show, we read it aloud. And for this special promotion, if you leave a 5-star review and write something on the Rise of Jim Carey podcast, they will read it aloud. I'm putting it into writing. They have to.
100%.
There you go. Confirmed. All right. Thanks again, Dave. Thanks, Brian and Chris. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. We'll see you on our next episode of...